George Washington, President, General, Founding Father. A man with many mysteries and many other qualities that we seem to lack in American society these days. George Washington was born in Virginia. He lived on he owned a plantation with hundreds of slaves. George Washington worked very hard to get where he was. He read a book on manners to teach himself how to act like a proper gentleman. George Washington also helped build his own fortune, and his wife also helped with that. But how did George Washington, a simple Virginian farmer, rise up to become president of the United States? Not only president, but the first president. Well, the story is kind of long and kind of short. George Washington's military career started during the French and Indian War, where he was a colonel within the British Army. After the French and Indian War, George Washington spent his time earning his fortune that would then allow him to gain a life in politics. He was a representative during the First Continental Congress, and he also worked very hard to assert himself as this sort of military presence, wearing his military uniform to each and every single meeting they ever went to. George Washington eventually becomes commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. But why? He's just a Virginian farmer who was chosen by the people to represent him. Well, George Washington had this sort of presence about him. He was very humble and he claimed that he never wanted the job and always said that he worked very hard to get where he wanted. Upon being instated as the general of the Continental Army, George Washington even made the statement that he didn't want the job and felt he wasn't worthy to get it. George Washington spent most of his time as the general trying to keep the army together from falling apart. They were mostly just a bunch of drunken rebels who would fight the British Army to win independence. However, George Washington's brilliance comes not in his battle manner, but rather how he was able to evade the British Army time and time again. At the Battle of New York, his army crossed the river from New York over into New Jersey, which kept the army together. Drum, I think your hand's on. So what happened is his army was encircled by the British, and this caused him to have to flee across the river through boats provided by New Yorkers and farmers and all around the area. George Washington also kept his army together after the Battle of Cowpens, or not Cowpens, apologies, at the Battle of Trenton and the Battle of... never mind. At Trenton, he surprised the Hessians by attacking them in the middle of the night and then completely routed the entire Hessian force. George Washington was a very brave man and worked very hard to survive and flourish as a person. As a president, however, George Washington's achievements were not very big. I mean, yes, he was the first president of the United States, and yes, he prevented us from being taken over again by Great Britain. However, a majority of his time as president was purely spent trying to keep the country together and trying to prevent the country from falling apart with issues over slavery, with issues over the tariff, with issues over big government or small government. George Washington also kept the army in tip-top shape. He rebuilt it, he kept it furnished, he kept it replenished. George Washington also spent most of his time trying to relive the glory days. He never had a son, and his wife and his adopted son that his wife had in a previous marriage died during the American Revolution, in which he was able to suffer great loss. George Washington, like many founding fathers, never had the ability to see his own children survive in the country he so desperately wanted for his side. George Washington also tried very hard to keep his fortune, which he lost he lost a great amount of. Jerome, what time are we at?
4:25.
Oh my goodness.
Should we just say
No, I can edit all of this. George Washington also spent a lot of time making sure that America was strong together and made sure that she could become the great nation she is today. George Washington had to deal with many issues during his presidency and as a general, such as the Quasi-War with France, such as British problems with American colonization. He also had a very big issue on slavery. Many people don't know, but upon George Washington's will, he released all the slaves from his plantation. It shows his sort of character and the fact that he didn't support something, but he couldn't come out against it because if he did, the country could have potentially fallen apart. He had to sacrifice his values to prevent the nation from completely collapsing and turning into despair. And I am so done with this speech.
That's only 5:17.
That's all right. It only had to be between 4.5